Hi, my name is Mark and welcome to The Active Listener, where we aim to listen, not just hear. We firmly believe that everyone has an interesting story to tell, if given the space to do so. So listening to what our guests have to say, you may learn something. Well, welcome to The Active Listener, and today we have Dr. Rachel Morris. So, hello, Rachel.
Hi, Mark. Really good to be with you.
It's great to have you here too, and I'm very interested to hear what you're going to be sharing today. So could you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I'm a former GP, worked in the NHS for 20 years, and I now work as a coach and a trainer, specialising in resilience at work for people in high-stress jobs, and I also host the podcast You Are Not a Frog.
What was the transition from being a doctor to coaching?
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a very long, convoluted story. Depends how much you want to hear. But essentially, I've always been very interested in medical education ever since I was a GP trainee. And there was an opportunity when I was doing training to do 6 months of working at Cambridge University in their general practice teaching department to learn a bit about medical education. I took that opportunity and then started working at the university teaching general practice. So I worked for the medical school there. And I was there for a while, had 3 children while I was there, so lots of maternity leave, but did a master's in medical education. And following that, they asked me to set up the Doctor as a Professional course for the university. So that's all about the skills that you need to be a really good doctor that aren't the direct clinical skills. So not about examination, history taking, but more about teamwork, resilience, patient safety, all that sort of stuff. So as I set that course up and looked into what we should be teaching, what people need to know, I got really interested in resilience and the sort of team behaviours of clever people in high stress jobs. And I wanted to explore that a bit. And so I had a little bit of coaching myself, which was remarkable. You know, anyone who's a bit stuck, not quite sure what to do, get some coaching. It's just completely transformational, but I don't need to tell you that because this is what it's all about. Anyway, in that coaching, I thought I was pursuing lots of different avenues of what else did I want to do. And someone suggested that I did a health behaviour change coaching course, which was running in the east of England. And so off I trotted onto this health behaviour change coaching course. And my mind was just totally blown. I had never encountered coaching like that before. This was specifically about patients and how you coach them to help change their behaviour. So, for example, people with diabetes, how do you coach them for dietary change, for weight loss, for lifestyle changes? So it was quite specific. But just the whole principles behind it, I found absolutely fascinating. And actually, it was the first time anybody had really taught me to consult in a different way. And this idea that people were coming up with the answers to their own problems was just brilliant, because suddenly I felt this weight of responsibility shift from me as the doctor telling people what to do to the patient as their own advocate deciding what they were going to do and doing it. I mean, it can never be any other way, right? Because I can't make anybody behave in any way. So it's totally logical, but it did feel like a weight had lifted off my mind. So that's how I first got introduced into coaching. And then I actually talked to one of the trainers on that course and I said, oh, this is brilliant. Do you think the NHS needs coaching? And he said, oh, 100%. And he said, the other thing the NHS needs is team coaching. So you should go become a team coach. So I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So off I trotted. I did a coaching course, a EMCC coach practitioner course, and then I did a team coach course as well. So that was how I transitioned. And I just thought the principles were so powerful that I've never really looked back. And in fact, the principles I learned when I was learning to coach, I wish I'd learned them 20 years ago when I was a junior doctor and starting off in general practice and throughout my career. And I've actually taken those really core principles that I learned that are based on resilience, productivity, neuroscience, all those sorts of things. And that's where my training program has come from. It's those principles that I learned. I thought, oh my goodness, every doctor should do these. People in healthcare really need these. That's where the Shapes Toolkit came in. So I put them together to form the training program. So it was a real, eye opener for me. And really in medicine at that point, coaching wasn't really very well known, and we hadn't really come across many of these principles. So I wanted to be able to translate them very, very easily for people that were too busy to go on a really long coaching course, but needed really to apply them for themselves and for their team straight away.
It sounds like you've kind of been distilling down key points from the coaching and then applying them to medical context. And it seems like it's kind of a win-win, that the patient or the person that comes to you is empowered, but also there's a certain sense of pressure taken off from the GP. Tell me a little bit about the toolkit and what that is and how you implement it within a medical setting.
Well, the toolkit is 7 basic shapes. So one of the shapes is around the causes of stress at work. One of the shapes is around what I'm in control of, what I'm not in control of. One of them is around the vortex of busyness, so well-being essentially. One of them is about how we can be triggered by stressful things into the corner by our amygdala, and how we then don't behave very well, and how we can then get out the corner and change our stress reaction very much based on the work of the chimp paradox by Professor Steve Peters. One of them is based on prioritization, time management, using the simple, urgent, important grid. I think Eisenhower came up with that originally. And then we talk about how to have better conversations. So we think about how to escape the drama triangle, where people can get put into victim or rescuer or persecutor, and then a very simple coaching approach. And in fact, I started using the Shapes Toolkit outside of medicine. I started using it with some lawyers, actually, and I started using it with another team in another organisation, where the team lead had asked me to come in and just look at how they were working together. And there were a little bit of stresses and strains within the team. So it was really a team resilience building thing. So I tried them all out there, and I tried lots of different things out. And these 7 principles were the things that we landed on as being the most effective and ones that people found the most helpful. And I think the thing they all have in common is they're just dead simple. They're easy to remember, because when you're in a tricky situation, like say if you've got to have a difficult conversation or you're feeling really stressed, the last thing you want to do is to go to some sort of 10-point model on how to do something. You just want something really quick and easy. And for me, the corner shape. Okay, I'm in the corner. What do I need to do to get out? Or the drama triangle. Okay, am I acting like a victim here? Okay, I think I am. What do I do to do that? So, that's how it then worked. And then, in a medical setting, doctors, they're no different to anybody else. They really, they might think they are, but they're not. Some of the stresses are different. So the Shapes Toolkit is great in that it can apply to any professional working in high stress jobs. It's just the context is slightly different. So all we do is use different cases and maybe focus on slightly different aspects of things. But people are people wherever you go.
You've nicked my phrase. That's exactly what I always say. People are people.
Yeah.
I think what strikes me about the toolkit is exactly that you can apply it to any context. And the fact it's simple. You don't have to go away and train as a coach. Anyone can use that, and it's principles you can use in everyday life as well as directly in a work context. So from the point of view of the medical profession, been through an absolutely horrendous, really, really stressful time. Have you seen a huge uptake in use of your services as a result of that?
It's really interesting. I mean, firstly, when the pandemic hit, all my work got cancelled, as you can imagine, because it was all face-to-face training. But very soon we realised there was a huge need to support people on the front line. And so that's when the podcast really took off. We started doing some episodes. I worked very closely with a psychiatrist called Caroline Walker, who is known as the Joyful Doctor. She specialises in doctors' wellbeing. So we got together. We did lots of episodes about stress, anxiety, compassion fatigue, moral injury, all that sort of stuff for people working on the front line. And then, yes, I was asked to do an awful lot of stuff around stress, particularly webinars for people throughout the health service, in primary care, in general practice, and also in other organisations, because I think it was incredibly stressful for doctors and healthcare professionals. It was also really stressful for other people in all sorts of ways. And lots of managers who I was coaching at the time who weren't medical in other organisations, they were absolutely burning themselves out because they were very, very worried about their teams, and they were sort of running around like headless chickens trying to support everyone and make sure they were well, and having to do the day job themselves in a very difficult sort of virtual environment. And then half of them were also having to homeschool kids as well. I mean, at least doctors, their kids went to school. They got key worker places, but other people didn't. And so they were having to do that sort of joint thing. And it was really, really difficult. So it really focused the toolkit. Nothing changed in the toolkit, but actually I think organisations suddenly realised that well-being was a huge deal and really important. I mean, obviously I've been banging on about that for a long time, but people suddenly started to realise and start to see the effects of burnout and stress and the mental health sort of epidemic that we now have. So yeah, it really, really took off, and we've had to really pivot so that a lot of our stuff is delivered online. We've also found that with well-being, people don't have time. So we might be able to give them a really lovely all singing, all dancing experience, but actually if they don't have time to do it, that's no good for them. And particularly in healthcare, we're finding that healthcare professionals with the best will in the world, they've got all the good intentions of coming on courses and attending sessions. But if a colleague is off sick with COVID or something, they just have to cancel and go and do the clinical work. So we've had to really look at how we deliver stuff in the easiest and the best way. So we've gone much more into sort of memberships and things where people can watch on catch up or listen as podcasts or have little bite-sized videos. And it's really focusing on teaching managers how to use all this stuff so that they can disseminate it with their teams.
So there's a couple of things I'd like to pick up on there. I mean, firstly, in regards to the toolkit, it sounds like it's helping the individuals doing it, but then they take elements from that and apply it to their own work or their patients as appropriate. Is that would be right? Yeah,
absolutely. It's very much on two levels. Firstly, individual resilience. If you do the Shapes Toolkit, and not just if you do it, but if you then apply the shapes in your own life, you will feel better. You will get more time, you'll get more headspace, you'll feel more in control of your work. And at the same time, you can then use it with colleagues in conversations. You can use it to support your teams. You can use it in all sorts of things. I mean, I'm constantly, the zone of power is really the fundamental shape about what you're in control of and what you're not in control of. It's simply a circle on a piece of paper. I'm always doing this with coachees, with people I know, with myself. You know, what am I in control of? What am I not in control of? It's so simple. But while you're focusing on stuff that you're not in control of, that way stress and anxiety lies, because you cannot do anything about stuff that you're out of control of. And the only thing you can do is get stressed and anxious. So it really, really helps me reduce my stress and just try and accept that stuff which is out of my control.
So they're really good prompters, aren't they? You look at the symbol and it makes you think. One of the questions I'd ask, and this is something that comes up quite a lot with the people I coach, and indeed just people know in general, is like, well, Mark, this thing about well-being is really lovely and I hear what you're saying and it's great, but I actually live in the real world and I've got to deliver my work and I would love to have 10 minutes away from my desk, but I get sucked into doing that stuff. A couple of people have called in sick, we're understaffed already. I'm going to now have to pick up loads of work. Well-being, what does that actually do for me on a day-by-day basis? What would you say to that, Rachel?
Oh, and you know what, Mark? I hear this so much. I hear this on a daily basis, and I think this myself, right? And I am just as prone to the next person being pulled into all of that. And this is an endemic thing at the moment. I very quickly realised that there was no point going into organisations and purely teaching them about well-being. No point at all, because it just made people cross, actually. It's like, okay, fine, we know that, but we've got no time to do it. That's why the Shapes Toolkit focuses first on how do you take control of your work, how do you get time and headspace to then address your issues of well-being. Now, I think there's a few things in that. You know, you said, I don't get 10 minutes away from my desk. And I think that's a very common mindset. The reality is you do, and it's very possible to do that if you are intentional about it and you plan it and you schedule it in. You are 100% in control of when you sit down and work and when you don't sit down and work. And it's all about making a choice. It's about saying, will I choose to take a 10-minute break right now so that I can refresh myself, go for a quick walk, clear my head, and then get back to my work. And so a lot of what I do is about empowering people in this way. And in fact, this thing about taking breaks, it's so intuitive. Like, if you take a break, you will be more productive. So that 10 minutes, you will get back, because you will just achieve more. You cannot focus for more than, I think, about an hour at a time without taking a break. I mean, I think the optimum is about 25 minutes and then taking a 5-minute break. And when you're working, you're in focus mode. And this is why, sort of on a side note, this is why the Shapes Toolkit is quite important, because it's really based on neuroscientific principles. And I think once people understand the neuroscience, they're more likely to do the stuff. So when you're in focus mode and you're working, your brain has a very linear pattern, and you are focusing on stuff and you're in this deep concentration. Now, when you take a break, your brain goes into the default mode network. That is where you might be looking out the window, making a cup of tea. Just, you're not really thinking about anything, but what's happening in your brain is you're connecting across the different hemispheres, and you're strengthening neurological connections, making new connections. You are solving problems. And you do that in your default mode, not necessarily in your focus mode. So that break is really important, because you will probably come back and will have solved that problem that you were looking at before. So if you explain it to people like that, you need to take a break so that you can solve your problems. It's like, oh, okay, I will do that, even if it's just for neuroscience, and you'll be more productive. So once you explain why these things are important, telling them, oh, just need to do it because you'll feel better, that doesn't work, because people don't seem to be able to get doing this stuff for themselves. But if you say, it will make you more productive and it's better for other people, you'll have better patient outcomes, all that sort of stuff, they go, oh, right, in that case, I'll do it. So I think giving people the reasons why they need to do it, helping them be intentional about it and make the choice to do it, and then giving them ways of scheduling those things, of prioritizing, so that they actually are doing less. So when I teach about time management and productivity, there's a little bit about managing your focus and your attention, because we are so distracted. And anyone who's listening to this, if you have emails or messages pinging into the top corner of your screen, don't listen to the rest of this podcast. Just stop whatever you're doing and turn off all your notifications. And believe me, you will thank me, because your productivity will go up massively. Because when you're in focus mode and you get a disturbance or an interruption, it takes you 23 minutes to get back to that deep focus you were in before.
Wow, 23 minutes.
Yeah, 23 minutes. People don't realise that. So when they get distracted by the pings in or the emails, it's just, so turn them off. Lost my train of thought. Yeah, so once you tell people why and what and how, they will be much more likely to do it. And I really think we need to eliminate stuff, because we're all trying to do too much. So it's really thinking, what are your priorities? What will you focus on so that you can do your best work? And how will you look after yourself so that you can do your best work? And what is it that you can do to look after yourself so that you can do your best work? And I think with well-being, if I say well-being to you, you probably just think yoga and fruit or something like that. I think a lot of people do. And that can be really irritating, because organisations go, oh, right, what can we do for well-being? I know, let's give them a cycle to work scheme and give them a fruit bowl, which is called the fruit and bicycles approach, which is good. And eating fruit and cycling and doing lunchtime yoga, all good, all really, really good. But it's really annoying if you've got so much work that you can't do that. So it needs to be this holistic approach about how do we free up people's time and headspace so that they can go and do those activities that they think are really, really important. So I've forgotten what the question was, Mark. That's
really good answer. I think what's coming across there is the practicalities, and it actually something that most people can do, because often for a lot of people, when you say the word well-being, it kind of feels like, oh yeah, that's all yoga, and that's not for me, or again, not having time. So it sounds like to me it's something also about what you value and how you prioritize yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so here's an example. The other day, my phone got stolen out of my bag, which was so irritating. And it's taken me hours and hours to sort it out, what between the insurance company and cancelling stuff and recancelling stuff. Now, I've got a really busy week this week. And if you said to me last week, Rachel, do you have 4 hours to sort your phone out? I would have been like, no, I'm far too busy. It happened. I'm like, yeah, I need to sort it out. So, we make time for what's really important. We genuinely do. If you break your leg, you're going to have to make time to go to A&E. If you have a heart attack, you're going to have to make time to rest and recover. If you burn out, you're probably going to have to take months off work to recover. And I think with stress, people don't realise it really is a matter of life and death sometimes, and a matter of your health. And when you have a significant health problem, you often and look back and go, oh, I wish I'd just put those things in beforehand so I could have prevented this happening. Now, a lot of health problems you can't prevent, you're not in control of. But I think chronic stress causes so much disability and morbidity and issues that we really can't afford not to pay attention to looking after ourselves. Because if you don't spend the time looking after yourself now, then you are going to have to spend the time recovering when you burn out and you're not able to work. So, and this was brought home to me quite recently. A friend of mine actually had a cardiac arrest, and we had to resuscitate him. It was really awful, but they couldn't find anything wrong with his heart, and they did put it down to chronic stress. And so I'm like, okay, this is really, really important. He's alive, which is good.
That is good.
But it's really sobering. And people struggling with this, I don't have time, I've got all this to do. I always recommend there's two amazing books. There's one's called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, which I just love. It's about basically called the strapline is do fewer things but better. Professionals generally in these high stress, high stakes jobs can do anything. You're intelligent people, you can do stuff, but you can't do everything. You really can't. You have to make some choices about what you're going to focus on. And then you get like FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's like, oh, well, if I don't do this and blah, blah, blah. And then there's another book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman that's just come out. And it's wonderful. He is, I think, the productivity journalist for The Guardian. And he's spent his life looking at how to work better, how to work smarter, how to work more, blah, blah, blah. And he's just come to the conclusion that we can't. We're not going to be able to visit most of the places in the world. But what we can do is make the most of what we are doing and focus on the things that are important. And I know it's such a cliche, but people genuinely don't ever say on their deathbed, oh, I do wish I'd done more work. Yeah, they really don't. They think, I wish I'd invested more in that relationship. Mm-hmm. I wish I had taken that chance or that opportunity and done something different rather than stayed stuck. I've just done a podcast which is coming out next week with a friend of mine from Cambridge, actually, who's just written a book called Regrets of the Dying. And she went and interviewed people near the end of their life and asked them what they regretted doing. And a lot of the regrets are, I wish I hadn't spent so long at work. I wish I'd prioritised my family more. I wish I hadn't stayed stuck. I wish I had made that change. And so if anyone is feeling stuck and worrying about change and just maintaining the status quo, you will regret that far more than you regret trying something different or making a change. Anyway, sorry, that's gone well off piece, but talking about time, those are two books that have transformed the way I think about time.
Thanks for the recommendation, and don't worry about going off piece. That's what we're all about. So that's great. What is it that drives you?
What is it that drives me? That's a really good question. People often ask me like this, why are you doing what you do? I just hate seeing people stuck in a life that makes them miserable when there are choices out there. And so I see a lot of doctors stuck in a place where they're utterly miserable, where they are supposed to be looking after people and helping the people to thrive, yet they are not thriving themselves. And I don't think that's right, that people shouldn't expect the same for themselves that they would want for their patients and for their families and for their friends. And so all my work really is based around helping people, inviting people to make a deliberate choice about how they will live and how they will work, because we always have a choice. And I've come from a place where I didn't think I had a choice. I was a clever girl. And so I did science at A level. And if you do science at A level and your dad's a doctor and your mum's a doctor, you go, well, I probably should go and be a doctor then. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to medical school, went through medical school, thought about what do I want to do after that? I thought, I don't really know what I want to do. So I thought, well, if I do GP training, I'll go through the different specialities and maybe I could stop off at one. So went through that, didn't ever really enjoy it very much. And then went to be a GP. And then luckily I found that I really enjoyed teaching and medical education. But I never really, I think I was quite good at general practice, but it just didn't quite suit my skill set. I have since found out I really love communicating. I love communicating with lots of people. I love being creative and all that sort of stuff. And the job didn't quite sit with me, but I didn't think I had a choice because I couldn't do the teaching unless I was working as a doctor. And I felt completely trapped and completely stuck. And it wasn't until I had that coaching and realised I actually had a choice, which really then transformed my life. But I was really scared because it's like, what if it doesn't work out? And what if I don't have any other skills and I don't even know how to start making a change and I don't know what to do? And that really, really keeps people stuck. And that's you're so overwhelmed, particularly if you have small children and you're working really hard. It's like, I don't even have the time to think about this. And so staying stuck is almost the easiest option. So we just do that. But if you stay stuck for too long, you get bitter, you get cynical, and you just don't enjoy life. I don't think I enjoyed life for quite a long time, actually, looking back on it. And now I absolutely love what I do. I have a really varied job. I work with really lovely, interesting people, and I still work with doctors in the NHS, which is a real joy to me because there is that guilt about thinking, well, if I'm not, they're short of doctors, they're short of GPs, should I go back and do that? But actually, I feel my real mission now is to work with doctors and help them not leave the profession. That is absolutely what I don't want them to do, but I want to help them make choices, which means that they can stay working, that they can be the best doctor that they possibly can be. And often that is looking at their time, looking at what they are choosing to focus on, looking at the tweaks that they can make within their work, just to focus more on the stuff that brings them joy and less on the stuff that doesn't. I guess the good thing is we're all completely different. So some people love, quality improvement and audit. Some people hate that. Some people can do different things. And so, one person's joyful thing is another person's, I can't bear to do that. But you need to just follow your own path and do what brings you joy, because working happier means that you will be more productive and more successful, and you can serve the people you're working with much better. And I don't think we quite get that. We are still in medicine. I don't know about in your organisation. We're quite stuck in I just need to work as hard as I possibly can, and then it will be all right.
I think that's probably the same in a lot of professions. There's a certain level of it being considered a badge of honour.
Oh, yeah.
But also a lot of what you're saying chimes with me from the perspective of education. I used to be a teacher, and what you're talking about, I would see a lot. Teaching is not just in the week and you have 6 weeks holiday and all that sort of stuff. That's just, and I think actually one of the things that probably came across during lockdown is that people began to realise what teachers actually do because they haven't homeschooled their own kids. But I've seen that burnout, and I've seen, 50% dropout, right? People who are like, been teachers for 20 years, leaving completely broken. People who have trained as teachers lasting a year and realising this isn't for me. So it sounds like really what you're doing could be applied in an educational context, as with many others too.
Oh, totally. It can be applied in any context. And absolutely, as a GP, I was signing teachers off sick with stress all the time. It's an incredibly difficult job. Yeah, but I think, the Shapes Toolkit, and I have done a few sessions with teachers with the Shapes Toolkit, it's gone down really well. I actually think it would work really well with teenagers as well and kids.
We talk about choices, and you sort of making reference to maybe somebody's got kids and feel overwhelmed. I don't have time for myself. There are also going to be people from backgrounds where, quite frankly, they don't have much income. Some of the circles I work with, there are people that come up with a lot of prejudice. And so for them, the idea of freedom of choice or having perhaps as many options as maybe I would have with the privileges I've had would be laughable. And hearing the idea of like, yeah, you can take control, it doesn't necessarily feel like that. How could they apply what you're saying, you know?
And I think that's a really important question to ask. You're not in control of the choices that you have. You are in control of which choice you make. If you take this to his extreme, Viktor Frankl, who was an Austrian psychologist, which was in one of the concentration camps, he noticed that the difference between the people who survived and who survived intact and the people who survived who just were really damaged were the people who survived retained their ability to choose their response. When everything else is taken away from you, when you have no choice about what you do, what you eat, where you work, then actually the choice you have is how you respond to situations. And Edith Egger, another Holocaust survivor who was in a concentration camp, she's written a book called The Choice, about the choices that you can then make, even having been through awful, awful things. And I'm not minimizing what people go through. I'm not minimizing the fact that lots of people, feel that they don't have a choice and actually, going to that particular job when there are no other jobs, so that's the one that they go to. But I still say that just because other people might have the choice, not have many choices, doesn't mean that you should not have choices. And this is something that people challenge me with. They say, oh, this stuff about thriving at work, Rachel, that's really self-indulgent and it's really, Western and lots of people don't have a choice. Okay, they might not, but does that mean that you choose to stay stuck? Because actually, I think that I do better work in the world for people that don't have that choice. And we're seeing all those refugees having to come over, from war-torn places at the moment. They didn't have a choice in that. Okay, but what's going to be better? People in this country who are thriving and have the time to be able to be generous and help other people, or people that are overwhelmed and exhausted and have no capacity left to give to anybody else in the world. Does that make any sense? That is a big, long ramble, but I'm not sure that made any sense.
It does make sense, and it's a big question. It's a big question. How do people access the Shapes Toolkit? And I just stress I'm not being paid for this.
Oh, there's different ways of accessing it. So if you are in an organisation and you would like the Shapes Toolkit for your team, then just get in touch with me, Rachel at shapestoolkit.com. We're going to lots of organisations now. If you want to access a course on your own, there's an e-learning course called Beat, Stress and Thrive for Healthcare, and I'll give you the link, Mark. It says for healthcare, but actually it applies to any situation. So it'll be, I do mention doctors and healthcare professionals, but actually if you're a professional in a high stress job, it will apply to you as well. So you can go through that on your own as an e-learning course. It will take you between 4 and 6 hours to go through the lessons and do the activities and stuff. We also have a podcast called You Are Not a Frog, where we look at all these different things. That's totally free. You can find that on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I also have a couple of memberships. One is for doctors called Permission to Thrive. Another one is called the Resilient Team Academy, and that's for leaders in health and social care. But we also have leaders in other organisations as well. We've got leaders in publishing, education, things like that, which takes you through the Shapes Toolkit, gives you the core content. And then every month there's webinars that are accessible. You can join live or listen to a recording. There's bite-sized videos and team activities and coaching demos and stuff. So there's a lot of resources about that. And if your organisation is putting on any Shapes Toolkit stuff, then try and get yourself a place on it. So we're working in various different areas. So yeah, do get in contact, listen to the podcast, sign up to the mailing list. And if you would like, what we can do, Mark, is give you a link for people to sign up for the Zone of Power handout so they can get that. And then they'll be on the mailing list and they'll hear about our various bits and pieces.
And the name, You Are Not a Frog.
Well, it's really similar to what we've been talking about. So there was a study in 2016 that came out about why GPs were leaving the NHS, GPs under the age of 50. And the predominant reason was because of the effect on their well-being of their jobs was having. And they, in this study, likened GPs to frogs in boiling water. You know, that old adage that if you are a frog and you're in a pan of cold water and it's slowly heated up, you'll just stay there and you get burned alive. But if you put in a pan of hot water, you'll jump out straight away. Now, obviously, with the workload building up very, very slowly, things getting really, really bad, and GPs are totally overwhelmed right now. You know, it's come up quite slowly, and the water's really boiling now, but a lot of people have got out. And I was thinking, you know, is those the only options we've got, to be boiled alive and burn out, or to leave? But no, that's not true, because you're not a frog. There are different things that you can do. There are other choices that you can make in order to stay working, but not get boiled alive, essentially. So that's where the "you're not a frog" has come from. Although I was told recently, frogs don't actually do that. They will actually jump out sooner. So frogs are perhaps more intelligent than people.
I'm really mindful that we could probably spend an entire week unpacking a lot of these things. But before we wrap up, we have to do what we do with everyone who comes on here. So we're going to have favourite 5. I'm going to ask you. But before I ask you that, what is the thing that you're most proud of?
Well, I'm immensely proud of my family. They're wonderful. I guess the podcast actually is the thing I'm most proud of. It's just because I get so many emails from doctors saying thank you, and how it's helped them through a burnout episode that they had, or helped them survive, or help them maybe change jobs into another practice or something where they're really thriving. And that, it really feels like I'm having an impact with the podcast. So I think the podcast I am very proud of.
Excellent answer. Having an impact for the good.
Yeah.
Favourite song or piece of music?
Oh, it's got to be anything by Radiohead. I think my favourite song of theirs is probably exit music for a film. From a film or for a film. Anyway, yeah, anything by Radiohead.
Person you most admire?
There's someone in the US called Rob Bell, who he does a podcast. He's written lots and lots of books. He used to be a pastor, but he's now really sort of talks about spirituality and inclusion. He's just got an amazing brain, an amazing way of thinking about things. So, and he has actually come on my podcast. So I was very, very lucky. So Rob Bell.
Food.
Or anything spicy. Indian street food. I'm really loving chats that you can get in the, you know, there's a fantastic new, it's not that new, curry restaurant in Cambridge called Tawa, which is just near the station. Amazing. Good choice. Place. Ooh, there's so many amazing places. Up a mountain in the Alps skiing. There we are. It's my favourite place. Very nice. And finally, book, film, or video game. I always recommend lots and lots of books. I can never really remember the books that I of all time that I've liked, but the most amazing book I've read recently is All the Light We Cannot See. I thought that was the most amazing work of fiction. The best film, oh my gosh. La La Land is one of my favourite films. I do like that. Yeah, I don't do video games. Sorry, they are a time suck that I don't need to. They are a route I'm not even going to go down, because I just know my time will disappear into that. So yeah. But my favourite TV series is Motherland, because it just makes me laugh out loud. Because and actually, really worryingly, when that first came out, 2 separate people came up to me and said I really reminded them of the main character, which, if you've watched Motherland, is not a compliment. And luckily, they did come back afterwards when the series had progressed a bit and go, actually, no, Rachel, you aren't like that. But yeah. Well, look, thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And please, everyone who's listening, do check out the podcast. It's worth a listen to. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Until next time, remember, help people feel valued. Listen. Don't just hear.